Mr. Chairman, welcome back to our program. Watching elections in Europe over the last week or so, far-right parties, as you probably well know, have done very well in Germany and France, the Netherlands, and elsewhere across the European continent. A lot of these are pro-Russia and do not support aid for Ukraine. I'm curious what you make of that, since your finger's really on the pulse of what's happening worldwide.
Well, I was just in Paris after Normandy, 80th anniversary D-Day, and talked to a lot of the lawmakers there. I know the Prime Minister of Italy is very conservative, but she's also very pro-Ukraine. So I hope you're not accurate in that statement. I hope I'm right in saying that I think just because they're conservative doesn't mean that they would not support Ukraine against Russia's invasion, and this isolationism trend that we see in some parts of the party. Uh, so I remain optimistic that there's NATO's support is going to stay strong for Ukraine. Ukraine's very important as to what happened in Taiwan with Chairman Xi, and also the Ayatollah in the Middle East.
Yeah, I was just watching, AFD specifically. We don't have to get into the AFD specifically in Germany, but they're a lot more pro-Russian. Let me ask you, let's switch off to Normandy here. You just returned from Normandy, marking the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion there. Your father served in World War II as well, and you said that it's our generation's turn to protect the free world, something we've heard echoed from many other world leaders over there. But looking at some of the far right winds, it looks like democracy is under attack in some other countries. How challenging do you expect that to be for our generation?
Well, we can't forget what the greatest generation did. They liberated, Europe from this dictator, and liberated democracies, and particularly France. D-Day, and it was very inspiring. I talked to many of the veterans, most of them over 100 years old, to hear their stories about the liberation. We don't we don't invade to conquer. We always are on the good side to liberate countries, and no generation did it better than theirs. People forget that we're in a world war on the cusp of dictatorship and tyranny taking over the free world, and so the sacrifice is extraordinary. They At the very end, one of the Marines had the watch. They call it the watch, that you are now relieved of the watch, and now the new generation has the watch over the free world.
How concerned are you that tyranny could come back, that democracy is in jeopardy here at home and worldwide?
Well, you know what? Ronald Reagan talked a lot about freedom, democracy, human rights, how important it was for us to lead the free world. And NATO was a big part of that. And he was not an isolationist at all. And it seems like there is a return to some of this, but we can never be for dictators and tyranny. That violates, I think, the American dream and our value system of democracy that our founding fathers stood for. So I know there's some people like to look at strongmen, but who are they? Putin, Chairman Xi, Ayatollah, Kim Jong-un. They were all tied together in this unholy alliance to defeat democracy. In fact, Chairman Xi told the president of Taiwan, democracy doesn't work. It's dysfunctional. I can make a decision and I can make it happen like that. The problem is you have to give up your freedom in exchange for a dictatorship.
And people watching this might say that, listen, Donald Trump said that he likes that quality in some of these leaders. What do you say to that?
I think, and we just saw him today. He envisions himself as a strong man who I think has this affection for strong leaders, but I would try not to misinterpret that for affection for dictators. He even talked about Putin at our conference today and how he told Putin that if you invade Ukraine, I'm going to hit you hard. And there was a lot of deterrence, under the Trump administration. He said the same thing to Chairman Xi about Taiwan, and of course, supporting Israel. So, uh, uh, yeah, I know, I know what you're talking about, but I hope people don't confuse it with supporting dictatorships.
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask you about Israel and Hamas. The UN said Israel and Hamas has both committed war crimes since that invasion by Hamas back on October the 7th. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is going to address Congress next month in July. A lot of Democrats are talking about protesting that, not showing up. But if you get a moment to the side with the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, what would you say to him?
And I have. I have spoken to him. And I was with him after October 7th. He showed me the Hamas videos, wanted me to show it to the Congress to, first of all, know what happened to his people, as he said, and never forget. So we can't forget what happened that day. I think that this sort of pro-Hamas movement in this country and anti-Semitism is a bit disturbing for me, being the son of a World War II bombardier who bombed the Nazis, and now we have this rise in anti-Semitism. And I think when I've talked to him, it's just that stay strong, get your military objective done. I think there have been a lot of delay tactics with the ceasefire talks. They want to finish Rafah because you got 4 battalions of Hamas in Rafah. Once they have finished that project, which could be in a matter of weeks, then, Jason, we can get to what I'm really excited about, and that is the peace process. Uh, you know, Saudi Arabia is extremely interested in cutting a security deal with the United States and Israel, which could be a complete game changer in the Middle East. Remember, Saudi and a lot of the Arab nations never have respected Israel's right to exist. This would be a total game changer that would lead the rest of the Arab Muslim countries to see the right of Israel to exist as a state.
Israel's taken a lot of criticism from countries that we haven't seen criticize Europe, like Germany and other places, for not being more surgical in its strikes against Hamas terrorists and hitting hospitals, hitting schools, and places like that. Does Israel need to do a better job in fighting this war against Hamas and minimizing civilian casualties?
Well, urban, warfare is as I say, war is hell, and there are casualties. I would say the ratio is a little bit lower than what we had in Mosul in Iraq. But of course, I mean, every time I've talked to them, I tell them, don't forget about the humanitarian aspects of Gaza. Do not block access of humanitarian aid to Gaza, because if they see
What has he said to that? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. What has he said to that when you shared that with him?
well, they opened up more access after I talked to them, and I think it had an impact. And they said we want to flood Gaza with humanitarian aid. I just talked to Cindy McCain, the World Food Program, today, and there's still a problem when you got 1.5 million evacuated from Rafah in the humanitarian zone, but they can't get proper access to them. And the last thing we want to do is breed more anti-Israeli sentiment. So I stress to them why humanitarian aid is so important.
Two last questions for you. You visited Taiwan recently, taking the newly inaugurated president a Stetson cowboy hat over there. I'm curious how concerned you are, or you might still be, that we are teetering on the edge of a Chinese invasion there.
Well, I was greeted when I landed on the island after the president's inauguration. There were warships and aircraft that surrounded Taiwan in a blockade as a prelude to what an invasion would look like. And so I talked to our Indo-PACOM commander about Paparo, about the plans. I am worried about it. I think we have to emphasize to Chairman Xi that at what cost? Remember, TSMC produces 90% of the advanced semiconductor chips for the world. That's why I introduced my CHIPS bills to pull supply chain out of there. But we met with TSMC, and their report was that if China invades, we will shut down. And it would have a devastating impact globally on economies of scale. And is it really worth the reward versus risk if he inherits an island that's been bombarded with people that will hate him and then shutting down the global supply of semiconductors?
Hmm. Last thing here for you. There are lots of hotspots in the world today. I always appreciate talking to someone like you who has firsthand knowledge of what's happening on the ground in these places. Which ones should we be watching closely?
Well, I think long term, the great power competition is with China. And it's on a lot of levels, advanced technologies, AI, warfare. We have a lot of export controls on my committee to stop selling them the technologies they use to build their war machine, like the hypersonic weapon. But what keeps me up at night, Jason, is I don't want to see another world war like my dad did. And we have two hot wars in a hot zone. You know, one in the Middle East, one in Eastern Europe, and potentially a hot zone and a potential war in the Pacific. If the unholy alliance, comes together against the free West, we could see another scenario like my father's generation.
Hmm. Mr. Chairman, always good to see you. I appreciate the insight.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be here.